Hello, Clement29 here with another Topic of the Week video. We continue Halloween month with another MCU topic. This time, it's on the show Agent Carter. This topic was submitted by Tumblr user grimaulkins, and her topic is everything you dislike about Agent Carter, of which there are many. Agent Carter is another one of the shows, and I believe it was announced after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was meant to be another one of those expanded, things in the MCU. I personally was extremely excited about it when it was first announced, because Peggy Carter's getting her own show. Like, oh my gosh, she's one of my favorite characters, and honestly, one of the best. I mean, it's going to be post-war. It's like we're gonna see her like helping found S.H.I.E.L.D. and working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and doing the early days of S.H.I.E.L.D. And there's gonna be Howard Stark and wow, and the promos that were really just teasing, showing Peggy Carter, and I watched the show and it was awful. I didn't laugh. I quit after the second episode. It was that bad. To explain how many things are bad, you have to go... oh my gosh. I watched some parts of it just simply because my parents watched it until it got canceled, and thank goodness it got canceled because that show was awful and did nothing but screw up Peggy's character. The show basically... one of the biggest problems with the show is that it doesn't know what it's doing with these characters. In the first episode, somehow Howard Stark is accused of being a traitor to the United States. So what do? They literally rehash Tony's Iron Man 2, Senate hearing thing, and him basically doing stuff almost shot for shot. And I'm not even kidding, including he's sitting there talking and he turns around and he's like, "Yes, dear." And it was so lazy. And on top of that, and then Howard ends up running off and he becomes like a movie producer or something. What? What? You're telling me that he's not doing anything with S.H.I.E.L.D.? He's not doing anything important? Despite all the hints dropped in Iron Man 2 about this, but... why? Honestly, I would have been really interested to see Peggy and Howard, working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and missing Steve. Isn't that what this is supposed to be about? Is this supposed to be about, the foundation of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Here's another thing. Peggy Carter, war hero. Personal, very close friend of Captain America. Was there during Captain America's, basically creation. Worked with him numerous times. Respected by I don't remember the general that Tommy Lee Jones played. Patton? I don't remember. But, highly respected by him. The whole show was about her being in some sort of generic government job, with a bunch of generic sexist guys being sexist to her. Oh, she's a war hero? This doesn't count at all? And of course people are going to say, but it's the times. Okay, why isn't she forming S.H.I.E.L.D.? It was implied that this is basically what happened after World War II. There's a reason why Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. have the old Hydra equipment, is that S.H.I.E.L.D. was created and they confiscated all of it. And they sat it in crates for a really long time, but... why is she in some generic job with a bunch of generic characters who nobody cares about? Why? Nobody wants to watch the show to watch Peggy Carter get made fun of and insulted and have sexist guys around. Jeez. Captain America the First Avenger already dealt with that. They had that one douchey soldier who was basically saying he wanted to sleep with her because that's all he saw her as was a pretty face, and then she punched him and the general was like, "Ha, you're a loser." And that was it. other than that, she's always treated with respect. So why is it suddenly different? Why is she suddenly stuck in the spot of not having any respect? And even forgetting about the times and, oh, this is historically accurate. From a narrative standpoint, we don't want to watch this. In this universe, S.H.I.E.L.D. should be formed. And as far as I know, it was never even talked about in the show. I didn't watch every episode, thank goodness. And then she does these random, plot lines that are completely contrived and utterly stupid. And of course, none of it has any relevance to the plot of any movie. And of course, none of this is going to connect because the MCU movies never connect to any of the shows. Of course, then what's the point of having them then? Why? Why have these stupid plots? And I mean, it gets to the point where, you can just tell that the people writing this had no idea what they were doing. Some lady, they have this thing that can, absorb people and stuff and kill someone. And this one lady who's, an actress or something, she has this, and then it's but none of this has any relevance. You would think that a prequel show would actually do stuff that would set up future events. You might have, you could have, why didn't you have, Howard and Peggy talking, and, he's talking about how he has this idea of this, his vision and, for the future, and then you see him talking about stuff that's talked about in Iron Man 2, and, just stuff that would lead into stuff. I don't know how old Nick Fury is, but meeting a young Nick Fury. Or even Robert Redford's character from The Winter Soldier, which, as awful and completely stupid as that movie is, establishing his character would be a good idea. But no, none of this stuff is done. This show has no relation to anything. Well, there's the character Jarvis, which I honestly found his character stupid. That's not even to get into the fact that people were shipping him and Peggy. This feels like it was made by someone who hadn't watched any of the movies. Outside of occasionally, I think Steve might have been referenced a little bit, but he wasn't all that important, which is absolutely absurd. Even in The Winter Soldier, when you see these flashbacks or these videos of sort of a middle-aged Peggy, she's talking about how important Steve was to her life, and even after he had died, which, of course, that was all stupid and anything, because it's just trying to wring some emotion out of you, but if you're trying to keep it in canon, try to keep things consistent, because nothing between the movies and the shows, nothing is consistent. Nothing matters to each other. This is why the whole MCU sucks now. And of course, I can't talk about this without talking about how Peggy's character is ruined. You know how she got mad at Steve for kissing Natalie Dormer? I don't remember the character. I don't even know if she had a name. Now Peggy's basically macking on numerous guys. She has all these random love interests. Why? And some of the initial love interests were just, those generic douchebag guys, and it's no one wants this. Were you guys just sitting? Were they so did they not have any ideas for this show? You could at least have it be the formation of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the early days. That's what I thought it was going to be. That's why I got so pumped and excited for this show. We get to see how it happened. We get to see how Peggy was introduced. There's this one line that I really loved in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I'm not the only one who caught on to this. It was Ward, when being talked to, and they were basically talking about S.H.I.E.L.D. and the acronym and stuff, and they're like, what does this mean? And someone's like, and Ward's like, someone really wanted our initials to spell out S.H.I.E.L.D. And then you see, and of course think about Peggy naming it S.H.I.E.L.D. after, Steve's S.H.I.E.L.D. And I'm like, we could have had cute moments like that that connect to each other, and it's painful to think that a show with so much potential literally dropped the ball in everything in the first episode. I mean, it's like you wouldn't have missed anything going from Captain America: The First Avenger to this. Why? Because Captain America: The First Avenger barely matters. I mean, the characters aren't introduced. You know, only Steve and what am I saying? Steve's not around. Only Peggy and Howard are there, and Howard basically splits the. Excuse me. He splits in the first episode, and then he's just kind of a war criminal, as far as I knew. And chasing all these like random plot lines, and ultimately that's the biggest problem with this. It doesn't mean anything. Agent Carter doesn't mean anything. It was feminist pandering, which why is there any sort of political stuff? Captain America: The First Avenger had a moment of talking about of sexism, but it didn't focus on it because no one wants to sit around seeing something that talks about this. No one wants to see a show that basically shoves down your throat sexism, and it's just the writing was just bad in every way. It wasn't just the romance, it wasn't just the plot lines. Everything was bad. The characters, I didn't care for anyone. The fact that I quit a show starring Peggy freaking Carter after 2 episodes, and the only reason I saw any other ones was because it was on because my parents were watching and I happened to be in the room. That says a lot. I shouldn't want to give up. I mean, I stuck with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. up until the Winter Soldier tie-in when suddenly Ward was evil. I stuck with that show, and I was almost totally bored watching that show. It had a few good moments overall, but it didn't really mean anything. When it looked like it was going to mean something, they screwed the pooch. So my problems with Agent Carter, everything I dislike about it, is to be the fact that it's not a show about Agent Carter. You can literally replace Peggy with any woman. Doesn't matter. Changes nothing. That means they're not writing Agent Carter. They're writing Agent Woman in the late 40s, early 50s. And what's the point? Why would you even want that? It doesn't make sense. I could probably go into greater detail if I actually watched every single episode. I'm honestly trying to forget the episodes that I did watch, because every time I watched it, it was just dumber and dumber. I felt myself facepalming every time something happened on the screen, every time there was romantic melodrama, and it's like, and I just keep forgetting that even in the movies, always portrayed Steve and Peggy as true love. And this, Steve who? She's got plenty of other hot guys to make out with. And then there was that black scientist guy who don't even know what his deal was. He's like died or something. And it's like the problem is that he took this is a core issue with the writing of the stories. It took the idea of comic book plots and took away the good parts. Comic book plots are oftentimes entirely ridiculous, and we love it for that. This allows the writers to tell completely absurd and really fun stories. I mean, you can't tell a Batman story making everything 100% serious with no supernatural or absurd elements. I mean, you couldn't have characters like the Joker, or Ra's al Ghul, or, Man-Bat, or Solomon Grundy. You can't tell Superman without the fact that he gets powers from the sun, and he just can shoot lasers from his eyes and fly and be impervious to bullets. And one of his biggest enemies is a genius bald guy. And then another one who's an evil android. It's like these kinds of ridiculous elements work because they give comics their own identity. The Agent Carter just takes this ridiculous and it tries to put it into a fairly grounded concept, and it doesn't work because there's no sense to it. If you take a look at the Phase 1 movies, as ridiculous as they were, they all had some sort of semblance of sense to them. They made sense. Where they were generally internally consistent. This, it's like they thought weird stuff, and that's about as far as they thought about it. It's a bad show with bad writing, bad characterization, an insult to Peggy and Howard's character at that. It doesn't make any sense. Overall, it doesn't matter at all. Now, granted, you shouldn't have to be watching the shows to know what's going on in the movies, and you shouldn't have to be watching the movies to know what's going on in the show. But there should be some real connection. I mean, I watched Captain America, the First Avenger, and I loved that movie. And I watched the show, and I'm like, this show sucks. It misses the point on everything. It doesn't do anything right. Like, I'm honestly, outside of maybe some costumes and, sets, I cannot think of a single thing that this show did right. That's how bad it is. Peggy Carter deserved so much better than Agent Carter. I'm glad it got canceled because that show was circling the drain from episode 1. I can only pray that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. finally gets canceled and they stop ruining everything in that. I think I'm about done for this episode. Agent Carter, terrible show. If you want to watch last week's video, if you want to watch last week's video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's video, you can check that out here when I get that done. If you want to submit a topic, you should follow the rules that I'll post down below. Make sure that it's something fictional. It's about something fictional. It can be something from an internal perspective of the characters, and it can be something from a writing perspective or more meta. It can be about, stuff. Just generally want to keep it more lighthearted, not real-world topics. If you want to submit a topic, if you're on YouTube, you can simply comment below. And if you're on Tumblr, you should send me an ask and do topic, and then whatever ask you want me to talk about. Just make sure, of course, to follow the rules below. I get really depressed thinking about the MCU sometimes. Thank you for watching, and next week we will continue on with more MCU topics.